Processing.
When TV and radio collide.
Love it.
Wow. This is what you get. You're listening to JJ and Alex. Presented by G2G Bars.
Don't touch that dial.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Now that's hockey music. Metallica. I love it. The NHL train is coming. Rolling towards town. Nothing stopping it now. For an incredible selection on Kia, Subaru, Chevy, Jeep, Dodge, or Ram, visit Doug Smith dealerships in American and Spanish Fork. Great service starts with know-how, and nobody knows how like Doug. Hey, Doug. Better. Still not as good as Alex. One more week, folks. Bear with me. We're getting through it together. All right. What a wild 24 hours it was yesterday. We could not get enough of the breaking news and the coverage. This is a very exciting moment for our community, for sports in Utah, and this could be one of the most pivotal and most memorable moments in our state's history when it comes to sports. I certainly think it could be, if not the biggest story of the decade. We potentially have Major League Baseball coming here, but that's not likely until the 2030s. Yeah. We're waiting patiently on that. And, of course, we're waiting patiently for it to become official that the 2034 Olympics are coming to a town. But we certainly are seeing that NHL could be here much sooner than later. And we're about to talk to one of those newsmakers who broke news yesterday right here. It's The Cut on at the 4 o'clock hour.
It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is what made the cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
We want to introduce all of you in Utah to one of the best, if not the best, beat writer in the NHL working for ESPN. He is Greg Wushynski, who broke news yesterday, along with others, about what's happening with the Coyotes. And, Greg, we appreciate you joining the show. It's a thrill to talk to you. Hopefully this is the first of many.
I think it will be. I'm pretty sure, although the ink isn't dried, that this is the start of a beautiful relationship.
Well, it's a great opportunity for you to introduce yourself to this Utah market. Everybody here is fired up and excited. You did great work on this yesterday. At this point, just share with our listeners what you know at this point about this situation and where it currently stands.
Yeah, I mean, we did a lot of reporting on it yesterday. Obviously, everybody saw that the NHL has two different schedules drawn up for next season, one that has the Coyotes in Arizona and one that has the Coyotes having relocated to Salt Lake City. After that news broke, we all started really digging, and the digging that we did, myself and my colleague Emily Kaplan, it turned up a lot of definitive sources saying that this thing is done, that the Coyotes are going to move to Salt Lake City beginning in the 24-25 season. The problem in reporting it that way is that the NHL, the Salt Lake City people, and the Coyotes, none of them would confirm that it was at that level of finality. But everything that we heard from, the framework of something being worked out to, the anticipation from league sources that this was going to happen points to the winds blowing towards Salt Lake, I think, next season.
And the winds, does it point to the potential April 18th date that's been thrown around being the day after the regular season finale?
Yeah, I think so. I think if the Coyotes, if this thing gets done, and again, like the ideal timeline would be to do it after the regular season, do it at a point in which the players will still be around, Arizona to talk about this and to deal with the fallout of it, so then they can kind of begin the transition to their new homes. But again, we're kind of at the mercy of this deal being done. It's a lot of lawyering at this point. It's a lot of determining, how much money is going to transfer between the two entities in the NHL. Some of it could be the terms of how Alex Morello, the owner of the Coyotes, is going to relinquish control and some of the promises that might be made to him vis-a-vis an expansion team coming back to Phoenix at some point. So there's still a lot up in the air insofar as the details. But again, everybody you talk to certainly had a sense of finality in their voices yesterday with regard to this thing getting done by the end of the season and for next season.
Before we move forward with some of the details and what could be and look into the future, I want to take a quick step back for our listeners who, there's a good hockey community here, but the majority of people do not follow the league. That's certainly going to change. How did we get to this point with the Arizona Coyotes, and why has there been so many problems with that organization in Arizona? Why has it failed there?
Well, you're talking to someone who used to have to stream Glendale City Council meetings at 2:00 in the morning.
Oh my gosh,
to,
I'm sorry.
Follow the Coyotes' plight back in 15 years ago. The long story short, they moved out of Phoenix to Glendale. They didn't draw any fans there because they moved away from where their fan base is. And then on top of that, they started to have all these issues with the city of Glendale, which eventually canceled their arena lease. That led them to Tempe, where they've been playing in Mullet Arena, the amazingly named Mullet Arena, on the campus of Arizona State University that only seats 5,000 people for the last 2 seasons. They're there in anticipation of getting an arena done in Tempe at some point. They had a vote last year, which it looked like was going to be something that passed, and they thought that the arena deal was going to go through. The NHL was pretty happy with it, and then the voters rejected it, mainly because they didn't trust the Coyotes to pay their bills based on what happened in Glendale. And so they have a new arena plan. It requires them to win a land auction this summer. And then, if this thing does get off the ground, shovels wouldn't be in the ground until 2025. At the earliest, they would have moved out of this Mullet Arena, college hockey arena, in 2027. And the NHL was kind of soured on this plan. After the vote went through, they kind of soured on the whole ordeal with the Coyotes. So it opened up some of the avenues for relocation. Obviously, we all know Ryan Smith, very, very aggressive in his courtship of an NHL team. And it was right place, right time for Salt Lake City. They had an arena, they had an owner with the money, and they had a team that, frankly, had kind of exasperated all of its chances to try to find a new arena in this market.
What has Ryan and Ashley Smith done, do you think, to really kind of break into this NHL circle and become an ownership group that the NHL wants to be part of?
It's a several years process. I mean, apparently, they've been talking with Commissioner Gary Bettman for more than a couple of years now and trying to lay the groundwork and earn the trust of the NHL. I know from talking to people around the league that they like Ryan's innovation. Some of the things that he's done with the Jazz, in particular. Some of the digital stuff that he's done with the team and outreach to the fans. And the NHL has always been very open to the idea of trying to get some really smart, innovative people inside the family to help grow the league, to help share their knowledge and share their experiences. The fact that there's an arena that can house a hockey team, even though it's not necessarily a hockey arena. We all know the questions about sight lines at Delta Center and that kind of thing. But he's someone who's done the right things. There are some times when he's maybe been a little bit more outward in his approach to trying to get a team than maybe the league normally likes from its owners. When a team is on the verge of relocation and then the owner puts up on Twitter, "Hey, what should we name this team?" It's a little bit more aggressive than the NHL likes. But it clearly didn't discourage them at all, and I think they've been very, very excited about trying to have him join the family of NHL owners.
What does the NHL love about this situation? You just broke down why they love Ryan Smith, but obviously there's plans here. The groundwork's laid. It's moving forward. They're going to build a brand new arena for this team to go along with the Utah Jazz in the same building. But what is it about this market that the NHL likes?
Well, it could be a new arena, or it could be some major renovations to the current arena. We're not quite sure which direction that's going to go yet. But the bottom line is that there is an arena. And so it's a combination of having an owner that they liked, an owner that could clearly pay the bill for acquiring a team, and then also having a team that they quite frankly feel needed to move in the Coyotes. So when you look around at the options, they weren't going to put a team in Quebec City. Quebec City has petitioned the league before, and the league doesn't seem like it has a real desire to place a team in Quebec at this point. Atlanta has 2 different ownership groups and no building. Houston has an owner and might have a building, but that's not a situation they're crazy about right now because they'd rather the NHL team maybe have its own arena. So Salt Lake City was clearly front of the pack insofar as the next place that they were looking to place a team. And again, right place, right time, right owner, right situation with the Coyotes, and it looks like the NHL will end up there.
Do you expect that there could be a path for the Coyotes or Phoenix to have a team again, or is that ship maybe sailed, or do you think the NHL wants to create an opportunity down the road for them to get hockey back into that market?
I think that's completely part of the plan. I mean, as I mentioned before, like this whole thing with the NHL and Phoenix has been going on forever. I mean, at one point, for those who don't know, the Coyotes went into bankruptcy, and the NHL actually owned the team for about 4 seasons. So they've done everything they can to try to keep the Coyotes in that market because they love the market. They love the TV market. They love it geographically vis-a-vis the other teams in the American teams in the Western Conference. They're going to go back to Phoenix at some point. The real question right now is who will own the team if they ever go back there. Because I think obviously one thing that has to happen is there needs to be an arena for that team. I mean, they're not going to go back and do this dance again. There has to be a building that's there already, shovels in the ground that they know they can put the team in. And then if part of the deal here with the Coyotes is that Alex Morello, their current owner, gets first crack in an expansion team, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I've heard that from a couple of sources that might be the case. I mean, I know the Coyotes fans kind of look at Morello and say, do we really want this guy getting another crack at owning a team in the market? But in order for him to not get real litigious about them trying to get the team away from him, I think they had to broker some deals, and there's a chance that he might get first shot at an expansion team should they come back to Phoenix.
I also wanted to ask you, because I think now if this happens, and maybe we're jumping the ship a little bit, but we all know where this is headed, but if and when it does happen, I think fans here want to know what type of team they're inheriting personnel-wise. Can you share with the listeners here where this franchise is at currently with their roster and their picks and their situation? How quickly could they be very competitive?
Well, you said two things that are interesting. You said roster and picks, and I think we can safely say that those are two different scenarios for the current Coyotes. They've got a ton of picks. If you just look at their first and second round picks over the next 2 years, I think they have upwards of like 9 currently. They've got a treasure trove of draft capital, which means that if and when they move, they could use those draft picks to try to like pick players for the future, or they could get really aggressive and try to get good immediately to spend some of those draft picks and acquire established players. They've got some real good young players. Clayton Keller is a guy who is a star in this league. He's signed through 2028. Logan Cooley is a rookie, really, really good young player. Same with Dylan Gunther. They've got some other players that are in the system. They don't necessarily have that one guy, that one super prospect like Connor Bedard in Chicago that really kind of ties everything together. But they do have some good young players. But again, the interesting wrinkle here for Salt Lake City is that the Vegas and Seattle obviously both entered this league in the last couple of years, and both had the benefit of the expansion draft. And the expansion draft rules were changed for Vegas to the point where both those teams got real good real quick. If you're getting a relocated team, you don't have the same benefit. So it's a little bit of a different situation for Salt Lake City than it was for the Kraken and the Golden Knights. But I still think they're inheriting a team that has some good young players, a lot of draft capital, and more than anything else, a whole lot of cap space heading into next season.
That leads me into my next question. I know the ownership has had a reputation for multiple ownerships, unwillingness to spend. I don't think that's going to be a problem with Ryan Smith. When you have an owner like Ryan Smith that's willing to invest and willing to spend, how much of a difference could that make for this current roster and makeup?
Oh, it can make a huge difference for sure. I mean, not only the ability to spend, but also the ability to retain talent. I mean, you have to wonder how many players decided not to go to Arizona or wanted to leave Arizona just because of the constant uncertainty inherent to that franchise, or the idea of playing in a college arena until 2027. I mean, there's so many little toxic things that happened around that organization that I don't think it really helped them bring in talent or keep talent. So just the stability of it all on top of the money that'll be available, I think is going to attract talent there. And then plus, I asked a bunch of players at the All-Star game their thoughts about Salt Lake City, because it was pretty obvious at that point that Salt Lake was going to be either an expansion city or a relocation city. And a lot of guys didn't know. They said they heard good things. Maybe they had a friend or a former teammate that played in the minors in Salt Lake City. There's an education gap right now, I think, between NHL players and this market. And so what you need is the current Coyotes that are going to play there next year and years going forward. to kind of explain, kind of educate the rest of the league what it's like to live there, what it's like to be there, and almost act like the Chamber of Commerce a little bit, or the tourism board, if you will, to the rest of the guys in this league to let them know that it's a good place to play.
Greg, I'm curious, how does the NHL view Bill Armstrong, general manager for the Coyotes? How is he viewed as a front office executive?
His reputation is through the draft, which does make it interesting. Like, if they wanted to keep him around and keep him in that gig, his bread and butter throughout his career, because he was with the St. Louis Blues before this, is his ability to draft well, to find players, to use those picks deep in the draft to find guys that eventually make the NHL. So, from that perspective, I think that he's got a good reputation and might be a guy that you want to keep around. That being said, it's really hard to get a gauge on his ability to build a winner, because he had so many challenges in that market and with that team to be able to do that. I mean, they were always sort of competitive a little bit. Their goaltending was always good. They were hanging around the playoff bubble a bit this year, but never to the point where they were really a serious contender. So I don't know if we really have a good gauge on whether or not he can build a winner, but we certainly know from his past history that he can build out draft picks and build out a farm system.
And Andre Tourigny's inherited a very tough situation. We played some sound bites earlier from him, and he was very candid about how, when this news started coming out, how much of an impact it had. How do you judge him? And this is his first run as a head coach. Your thoughts on him and how he's thought of around the league?
Yeah, I like him a lot, and the players like him too. I think he gets a good amount of stuff out of his players insofar as they're maximizing their ability to play and excel. I think he's a guy who's pretty blunt in his assessments of teams. I think he's a guy that challenges his players. And he certainly, squeezed as much out of this roster as he could this season to make things interesting. So it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing with him. But again, it's hard to figure out how much of this will transfer over. It could be a situation where Ryan Smith decides, better to keep things that are already in place there through next season, see how things go, and then I can really put my stamp on this team in the following season. Or maybe he already has some people in mind with regard to who he wants in these positions going into their first season in Salt Lake City. I mean, when guys buy teams, it isn't necessarily to keep the things that are already in place. It's to hire guys that they've been talking to for a couple of years about, hey, if a team comes here, I'll keep you in mind, and that kind of thing. So we'll see where it all heads.
You're right. We don't know, and I wouldn't even ask you to speculate on whether or not they will be back. But in case they were, I wanted our listeners to know who they were and how they were thought of in the league. You covered NHL as good as anybody. You've been to all the different places. I want to ask you, what makes a great hockey town? What is it about those places that we know that are great hockey venues and great hockey towns? What do they have that Salt Lake needs to develop?
I think the first thing is in-game presentation based on what we've seen in Vegas and Seattle. Now, granted, Vegas kind of has reset the template for a lot of teams insofar as in-game presentation, and it's kind of unfair to compare anybody to what they pull off in that city. But, the Kraken actually hired some of the people that did the pregame presentation in Vegas games to come up there to Seattle. If you go to a game in Seattle, it really feels like an event in the time leading up to puck drop. And I think that's kind of where, for a burgeoning fan base and a burgeoning market, it's got to start. It's got to start in how great is the experience in the arena for fans, not only before the game, but during the game and then after the game. And then on top of that, I think, it's such a simple equation, but success. You think about the way that Vegas in their first season went to the Cup final. You think about the Kraken making the playoffs in year two, getting a win over Colorado in a first-round series. And then you think about teams like Atlanta and Columbus and others that just went through years and years and years of not making the playoffs and stops and starts and things of that nature before eventually Atlanta moved to Winnipeg. I think you need to find success pretty early to kind of captivate the fan base, get them involved, get them living and dying in the playoffs with your team, which is how I think real hockey fans are made.
I'm curious too, Greg, how is the overall health of the NHL and growing the game, and with the current media rights with ESPN, and you work with ESPN.com, like just the overall health of the organizations at large and just the growth of the fan bases?
Well, they're going to pull about $1.3 billion out of a dude to buy a team. So things are pretty good on that front. No, I mean, when you ask that question, obviously the media rights deals are one thing, and the fact that the NHL decided to go with two different American rights holders, ourselves, ESPN and Disney, and then also Turner and TNT, I think really helped grow the game. The fact that it was monolithic with NBC for as many years as it was, I don't think was necessarily in the best interest when you look around the sports landscape and see how many leagues are on different networks, right? Well, now the NHL has the same thing here in the U.S. I also think that, Salt Lake City is getting into this thing at the right time because the state of the game on the ice has never been better. I mean, you've got a kid like Austin Matthews up in Toronto that's trying to score 70 goals, which is something we never see. Alex Ovechkin has never even scored 70 goals in a season. You're seeing guys like Connor McDavid and Nikita Kucherov try to get 100 assists in a season. We haven't seen that done since 91, 92. We're in a real offensive era, a bunch of really talented young players, and the quality of hockey insofar as the speed and excitement in the game. You turn on any game on any given night, and you're going to see some really exciting action. So it's a great time actually to get involved with the NHL. I mean, I've lived through many eras when it was like 1-0 games and guys diving and clutching and holding. It's not like that anymore, man. It's a really exciting product.
It's surreal that we're going to get to experience that now in Utah. I can't tell you how pumped up everybody is about this news, and we say that with thoughts about how these fans in Arizona must feel, but I'm telling you, people here are pumped up and excited for this, Greg. We can't wait for it. We're excited. Can't wait to embrace the NHL. Before I let you go, I got to ask you one last question. As of today, who do you think is going to win the Cup?
The preseason pick was the Edmonton Oilers. Of course, I did pick them last year too, which should tell you how good I am at picking stuff. But I still think that they have a shot at doing this, and I hope for Connor McDavid's sake that he gets to lift the cup at some point. But the two teams I had my eye on entering the playoffs are the Carolina Hurricanes, who have been close in a couple of seasons, went to the conference final last year, but made some really smart trade deadline acquisitions and getting Jake Gensel from the Penguins and Evgeny Kuznetsov from the Capitals. And the Dallas Stars, who were a bridesmaid last year to Vegas, who might be the deepest, most talented team in the West and seems to really be peaking at the right time. So those are a couple teams I'm looking at, but it should be a banger of a playoff, man. There's a lot of really good teams entering the postseason and some really good stories that could be told depending on who advances in these playoffs.
Well, you can't beat the drama of the Stanley Cup playoffs, and we're going to be watching it with a different eye this year. I can tell you that. Excited to experience that now that we know that this is coming down the road. Greg, this has been awesome. We really appreciate your time. It's great to meet you and talk to you. Look forward to doing this again down the road for years to come.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks for having me, and congrats, everyone. It's a really exciting time.
Can't wait for it. That's Greg Wushynski, who covers the NHL for ESPN. Mitch, that was awesome.
Great
insight. I mean, it's just nearing a done deal. This is close, and in everything he tells us about this, I get more excited, and I can't wait to get this going.
And it should be exciting, too. Just the product is more maybe offensive. I think that's always entertaining from what people
electric.
That's great to hear. I mean, the direction.
There we go. Hey, shoot these scores!
It's going to be an exciting time. And, it's a fascinating point, too, by Greg about in-game presentation. And that just screams to me Ryan Smith.
Nobody's better. I mean, you go to a Jazz game. You went to a Jazz game the other night.
Yes.
It's good.
It's an awesome experience. Yeah. Even in the times where they're on an epic losing skid, and it's still an awesome presentation. That, to me, just screams the Smith Entertainment Group, Salt Lake. They're going to do it great. I mean, that's kind of the bread and butter. Like, you think about the Olympics back in the day, All-Star Weekend last year. That's what we do, and I think it's going to be an epic experience, and also just the tidbits, too, about technology and the innovation to the creativeness to, that's something that the owners are drawn to with Ryan Smith. I think a lot of fascinating tidbits there from Greg and his work that he does at ESPN.com.
We look forward to talking to him more in the future, and this is an exciting time. And if you are excited about this too, there's no place to go other than here for coverage of this potential move, and it's getting more and more imminent of the Coyotes franchise to Utah. This is exciting times, and it's great to share some of that and get some more insight on what this could mean for all of us as we get ready to embrace NHL hockey here in Utah. We got to take a break from hockey. We got to go to we got to go to Augusta. The Masters is underway. First round today. Our friend Bob Casper, the great Bob Casper with Real Golf Radio, is next live from Augusta with a Masters update. That's next on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.